Thank you very much, and thank you all for being here. Wise is the stranger's eye, they say, so this stranger is keeping one eye on the clock. I just want to say a very few things very briefly. First of all, in addition to thanking you for your presence here and for this really impressive seminar, thank you for the opportunity to do this review. It's actually been quite useful for the OECD in ways that we might not have expected. It's particularly challenging because we do territorial reviews of countries. We do territorial reviews of discrete regions within countries. But it's very unusual for us to do a review of such a large region, which comprises parts of countries, entire countries, very diverse. And it's actually attracted a surprising amount of interest. Many people associated with the OECD didn't know anything about the NORA region, were unaware of the concept, became very interested. And one reason for that is that the challenges which we see in this region are in fact challenges faced by a large number of... something's not... Okay, better. So the challenges that we see in this region are in fact challenges facing a large number of OECD regions. And yet in some ways the NORA region faces them in particularly acute form. And that makes it very interesting and useful reflection. Carlos and I were in Sweden last week looking at some regions of southern Sweden, and when they begin talking about sparse settlement and remoteness from the centers of economic activity, we said, well, next week we're going to talk to NORA. You guys don't know the half of it. So it's been very, very useful for us and for many of our regions to reflect on. Secondly, we very much hope, and that's what today is about, that the strategy process will find this review to be a very important kind of input. We hope this is a review that will be useful to the NORA territories as they come together to think about their futures, both individually and collectively, and in particular in this process of follow-up that Lars identified. The last thing I want to say, I think the review is important for us. It's, we hope, important for you. Just a few global points, because I want to leave the meat of the review to my colleagues, who will present it in more detail and hopefully with better luck with the microphones. But I just want to set the scene by talking about some work that is not in the review, but that is actually informing the thinking behind the review. And this is the empirical work we do, statistical data analysis, based on data from about 2,000 plus OECD regions about the determinants of regional growth. And there are some findings from that shape the way we think in the review, and that I think are worth stating explicitly. The first is that there is absolutely no reason to accept the widely held view in the OECD area that to be rural or to be remote is to be faced with a future of economic decline. The data simply contradict that flatly. What we do find when we look at growth performance is that rural and sparsely populated areas are indeed more likely than urban areas to experience very poor performance, but they are also far more likely than urban areas to experience very strong performance. Yeah, that may work better. Super. Sorry. No problem at all. They may also experience very strong performance over the long term. We're looking at analyses over 10 and 12-year spans. So the idea that rural is synonymous with decline is nonsense. The second point, on seeing this enormous spread in the rural growth performance as compared with the urban, the fact that rural regions are much more likely to outperform or underperform, I scratched my head and I tested the first obvious hypothesis. The obvious hypothesis is that the fast-growing rural regions are the ones that are closely attached to urban regions, and the slow-growing regions. Is this okay? I'm cursed, right? So the first obvious hypothesis is that the slow-growing regions are the really remote ones, and the fast-growing regions are attached to urban hubs. We looked at that. I'm not wearing anything.
The microphone on the table is turned on.
Ah, okay.
Let me do that.
Yep. Okay. Thanks. Let's see if this works. So. No. This isn't. Yeah, it is. Okay. So now it's working. We're cooking with gas. here's the crucial point. When we test that, we find that remoteness doesn't have an impact. We find that very remote rural regions are as likely as very proximate rural regions to perform very strongly or very weakly. In other words, geography is not destiny. And that's really important. A couple of other points that come out of this work, and with the technical glitches, I'm running over time, so I'll be quick. The first is that the most important factors in all of our models and regressions, and we've done a large body of work, the most important factors affecting the long-term performance of a region are endogenous. That is to say, they're things that people in the region can do something about. It may not be easy. It's clearly harder in some circumstances than others. But we find that natural endowments, physical geography, these things over the long run do not come out of the models as really important. The things that matter, innovation, business environment, human capital, sensible investment in infrastructure and connectivity, these are things that regions and states can affect. So to a great extent, your future really is in your hands. And the last point I touched on innovation is this. There's a widespread idea that innovation happens in dense agglomerations full of clever people sitting over cappuccinos in Starbucks swapping ideas the way they do in Silicon Valley. That also is a myth. That Silicon Valley buzz exists in very few places. But successful innovation hubs exist in many places, and they take many shapes and forms, and they are not always associated with large urban agglomerations. We find in places like Canada and elsewhere quite important centers of innovation that are, in fact, in very rural and often physically remote locations. So I end my little introductory note by just saying to you that all of the review is informed by a large body of economic work which suggests that the economic future of the NORA territories is very much in the hands of the people in the NORA territories, and our goal is to help you think that future through and make the most of it. Thank you very much.